if you're not involved in what's going on, then you can't help change it. So, and if you want to change it to a certain way, get involved.
Hello, and welcome to the Elevator Careers Podcast, sponsored by the Allred Group. I am your host, Matt Allred. In this podcast, we talk to the people whose lives and careers are dedicated to the vertical transportation industry to inform and share lessons learned, building upon the foundation of those who have gone before to inspire the next generation of elevator careers. Today, our guest is Joe McAnulty, the General Manager of Liberty Elevator Experts, a consulting and inspection firm located in the Philadelphia area with service all over the U.S. Joe started his career as an apprentice and worked his way up in the trade. In 2018, Joe left the field to take his current role. Today, he serves on the NAESA Board of Certification, and he also sits on the board for EESF. Joe loves what he does and is passionate about the industry. Joe, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you. I've obviously we've had some conversations before, a little bit about the consulting world, and I'm excited to dig into that a little bit deeper. So, but I am curious, where did you start in the elevator industry to begin your career?
Sure. So I graduated high school and when I was 18, and I was a volunteer firefighter at a local firehouse, and one of the gentlemen that was there, he had said, he needed an apprentice, and I've always been working on cars, and my family had some, small little, basically, I guess, like rental properties that I always took care of. So I had the basics of like electricity and kind of construction. And so he started me off as his apprentice, and I really took to it because it was kind of everything. 3 days into the job, and I got to start welding, which I thought was awesome. Being 18 and just kind of, I was always interested in welding and electrical, and I was really into racing cars. So everything that kind of had the mechanics around it. When I was on the first day of the job, he took me up. I think we were 18 stories up. And he took me up and he set the ladder out and put a harness on me and said, "All right, go set that top bracket." And I looked down and I shook my head. I was like, "I don't want to do that." And he said, "Look, you got to go out there and do it." So went out there, set my first bracket on an 18 stop, and kind of broke the ice for being afraid of heights and things along those lines. So it was really cool because this industry kind of gets you involved in everything. And so when I got there, I started with Allred Elevator, and it was they had a great apprenticeship program. So I was able to kind of get my feet rolling, and they kind of brought me to the next level with, just being on different types of projects. I mean, we saw everything. Right. I got to do everything from being on the drilling rig to drill the hole for an in-ground jack, which I know most people don't get to ever do, but it was one heck of an experience. Something I never want to do ever again. But it was a messy day. I remember it was like 35 degrees outside, and we were drilling this hole, and there's the water's coming up out of the hole. And the gentleman I worked with was French Canadian, so he was cursing in French at me and another apprentice that was down there throwing the muck up into the dumpster, and we had no idea what he was saying, and we didn't know if we were doing things wrong or if he was just angry at something else. But it was a pretty, I tell people that a lot, it was a pretty unique experience because I got to do it once. I never had to do it again, luckily, but it was fun. It was kind of brought me around to see like there's other parts of it. So don't take for granted what I had when I was in new construction, and we were on pretty cake jobs that everything was clean and mint because it was new. So I started working on the mod side of it, and luckily one of my mechanics was one of the adjusters. And after I was there for a while and being on that side of it, I really enjoyed like the electrical side and troubleshooting and wiring and finishing out and figuring out how to do the tests at the end of the the new, whether it's new construction or modernization. And it really gave me a different perspective of it, from being on the drilling rig and slinging rails to, being up, at the end of it and cleaning things up and tidying it up and making it look and run good. And I got to get into the code side of it and, knowing the code, and a lot of them were government jobs. So it was always the newest code that was out there. So I then had switched to a couple different companies in like the Mid-Atlantic area, and it was great because I got to work with a lot of people and a lot of different mechanics and adjusters and even owners that were, had a different take on things, and some of them more innovative than others. But,
Sure.
some too kind of gave you, you didn't really have a leash. You just kind of went as far as you could take yourself. And that was one of the, I think for myself, I'm very self-motivated. So I got to, dig myself into anything, and they would call me and say, do you know how to do this? And I said, no, but I'll go to the job and I'll figure it out. Luckily, there was always time built in for me to, the learning curve, which was awesome. And I ended up on the service side of things, which is where I really felt more comfortable in and really enjoyed it. And, although slinging mud outside of that hole while I was digging in 30-degree day, service calls were, have their own problems, waking up at 2:00 in the morning. But, the troubleshooting aspect of it is where I really enjoy and, really passionate about. And that's what, kind of learning things and taking notes. I have a ton of basically like black notebooks that I keep, and they're not very organized. So if somebody else went in there, they would think it was somebody from like Rayman drawing inside of this. But it was myself writing notes down for whether it was a problem with a TAC 50 that I found that was very unique or something along those lines. I kept everything so that I can go back and remember exactly how we corrected those problems. And that's what I kind of liked, was figuring out the problems and figuring out unique issues. And that's kind of how I ended up at Liberty with the consulting side. Is we have clients all over the country and their elevator companies having problems. We kind of give them advice as to how to, maybe approach a certain problem or something we may see, or, obsolete parts. What do we do for solutions for that? Things along those lines that kind of got me on the service side. I really enjoyed. So how can I help the client out a little bit better with having like an unbiased opinion of, is something really obsolete? And if it is, do we need to modernize the whole elevator, or can we put something else in there to...
Sounds like you kind of hit things fast and hard and just kind of dove in head first is what I'm hearing. I'm curious, what were some of the things that really contributed to your success early on that really clicked for you?
Sure. I think definitely education, going to classes. I really enjoyed like going to like a GAL class. And when I got to be more involved in the learning experience, I really got to kind of take some pride in what I was doing. And then that just kind of motivated me more. So kind of seeing the difference in, I can go install a GAL controller without ever learning about it. But after you learn about it, it makes your job easier. And then it makes all of a sudden, your product that you're personally putting out, whether it be within your company or just in the industry, is always better. And that was the education side of it, was really what helped me kind of move along and be like more inspired to just kind of take on a different role, as whether I was an actual supervisor or at some point in time didn't even have title. It was just Joe kind of just did whatever I needed to do.
Some self-confidence to dive in, right? Just know what you're...
I went to a company one time, and I didn't know anybody at the company. And the one company I was at had just closed. They just locked up their doors one day. So I went to another company, and nobody knew me. And I just applied and walked in the door, and they put me with a guy who probably had about 5 or 6 years experience. And he did all maintenance. He probably does the best maintenance I've ever seen out of anybody, but he didn't know how to troubleshoot elevators or even go on service calls. So we started going on service calls, and I was just telling him how to do it. And so then they started giving him service calls, and then when I wasn't with him after I did my, onboarding kind of orientation, and he kept calling me, and he's like, you have to tell them that it was you. And I was like, no, you were the lead mechanic. You tell them. I was like, if you have problems, just call me and I'll help you. And he's like, no, I don't want to do trouble calls. I don't want, but now they think that I can. He's like, so we
you got me into trouble.
Yeah. I'm like, no, I'm like, just you'll be fine. And we currently still work together, and he's a great guy, but I always pushed him further and further. I was like, no, you need to, go on the service call, take it, call me when you're there. And, he was well educated. He had a certification, and, he was one of those guys that he always had a brush in his back pocket, and he would clean every single sill and every, just, he would sweep the controller out every single time he was there, even if it was a little bit of dust. He was that type of guy. And people like that really inspire me too, because I want to help them, because
Sure.
that no matter what they do, they're going to, just kind of give it their all. And he really did. So it really like inspired me to help push him along. And it made me kind of take a step back when I was doing something as minimal as maintenance and say, well, people really say, this guy does a really good job. So at maintenance, and I want them to say that about me too. So I would just kind of take notes from him. And like I said, we probably started working about 12 or 13 years ago, and we still currently work together. And it's great because we'll be on jobs, and his paperwork is phenomenal, and it's always clear. And, I'm sure, elevator guys' paperwork is always as fast as they can scribble it together is usually what it is, but his is very thought out, and it's always has the most accurate stuff. And he's very honest with what he's doing. So if you tell him you have 8 hours to go do this, and he finishes in 5, he calls you at 5 and says, where can we go next? So it's really like working with those types of people that kind of inspired me. And I guess we probably started, maybe it was probably about 15 years ago. We started together when I started at that company. I had a lot of education, and it, kind of took me to the next level. I worked with a gentleman who, he repaired like circuit boards and elevator circuit boards and different types of problems. He would get flown out to jobs all across the country to troubleshoot. And luckily for me, he was in a spot at a company where he was kind of a supervisor. I don't really know if he had a title, but I worked with him for probably about on and off for about a year. And he would eventually became like a manager, and he was a field guy. He always wanted to be on the field. He hated being in the office.
Right.
He would come out with me a lot and just teach me these real nuances of certain types of elevators and certain types of just things that you would just never realize, and you were never really taught. It's not taught in any book. And, he kind of drove me to the next level, I feel like, in troubleshooting with, kind of stepping back, taking a look at things that, going back maybe like 2 years in service calls and starting to see some trends and things along those lines. He was very analytical about it. He had no emotion when it came to troubleshooting. It was just, let's look at all the facts and let's think about this like outside the box. And when he did that, I still use it to this day. I mean, I have clients that we go all over the country for, and we troubleshoot things that, maybe 2 or 3 elevator companies didn't necessarily have the time to do it, or they were just kind of rushed through. And it really it makes Liberty look better because, we have that time, and we are able to kind of be well-rounded and take that approach to it from outside the box and from an unbiased opinion. And my team now that I have on the consulting side at Liberty is a lot of people that I worked with in the past, and guys that I like that. And all the time we get compliments from our clients, and they're like, that we had so many elevator companies out here, they couldn't fix it. And, Nick, all he did was look at the service tickets, and he was like, I know exactly what that is. Wow. And it's because of, looking at that outside the box. And I think that's really, having the book education and having education where you're working with people that have, kind of done it all, where they're, fixing circuit boards instead of just replacing a circuit board. So you really know what you're looking at. And
sure,
most of my team in consulting is guys that have been in construction. So they slung the rails, they dug the hole, and all the way up to the modernization side, and they've adjusted it all the way out. So that's, really like my passion is to have everybody is so well-rounded that we can take care of everything and
solve any problem.
Me personally we can solve your problem. We're consultants. I hate the word consultant because it's such a broad term, but really we're there as your elevator advocate, and that's what I want to be, is somebody's elevator advocate, so they don't have any problems. And they just tell me to talk to whoever the elevator company is, and we'll resolve it with them.
Yeah. So let's back up for just a second. Just curious, how long were you in the field? I mean, it sounds like you were certainly rubbing shoulders with all kinds of, different people, learning from them and them from you. At what point, well, I guess first question, how long were you in the field as a mechanic?
So next year will be my 20th year in elevators, I think.
Okay.
So I was in the field, probably, I mean, in reality, I was in the field until I started at Liberty. But I was in the field as a construction mechanic from 2003 to about maybe like 2008 or 9. And then I was doing construction and modernization. And then I moved into the service side, along that side. Now, when I was on the construction and modernization side, I was an on-call mechanic, and in between jobs, I would go on service calls and do maintenance. So I kind of started there, and that's kind of where I knew I wanted to be on the service side once I got a little taste of being on service calls. And, it's definitely a lot easier than carrying 18-pound rails, across a building or down a city block. But, so I was from there till about 2008, 2009. And then I kind of switched over to the service side. When I was on the service side, I was still adjusting for the modernization crews, and the new construction, just because I knew a lot of the inspectors, and just being, the code, I took it upon myself to kind of start learning the code in the different jurisdictions, and knowing that right before you're going to take a test or do a test or final acceptance, it makes things a little bit easier,
sure.
So that until about 2000 and, I guess I was probably a service, mechanic till about 2012 or 13. And I was in a supervisor, but mostly field role then. So, I was still working on elevators and being out in the field with the teams. And then 2000, maybe 13, 14, 15, it kind of started to slow down field work, but it was still mostly just like troubleshooting with the guys, even though I was still a supervisor. And then continue that role until about 2018, when I switched over to Liberty and came on the consulting and inspection side of it.
So at what point did you have that thought that, hey, I really want to get in on the consulting and inspection side, or was it more of an invitation from a friend that said, hey, you ought to look into this?
Sure. So it's kind of a dual answer to that. In about around 2010, I had met a few consultants and met a few inspectors, and it was kind of intrigued me. So they were third-party inspectors, I should say. Most of the time, I'd always worked with AHJ, people that work for the state, and I knew I didn't want to go on that side of things. But I met a couple of consultants at some functions, some NAEC functions, and really kind of intrigued me of what they're doing, and the design side of it. I always had an interest in CAD drawings and writing and the specifications, because being that adjuster, you have not only adjusting punch out for the code, but you got to punch out for the, as this consultant writes a 60-page specification, you have to read through it. And I always was curious of how it started. Do you just start a blank page and somebody just start pecking away at a keyboard, or is it set up in a certain way? And I never really got an answer, because the answer really was no. Most of the time it's cut and pasted from different documents and things along those lines. So fast forward to about 2017, I had talked with Chris, who's the president of Liberty, and we had worked together at our previous jobs and the job that I was currently still in at the time. And he was on the construction side and I was on the service side. And we had a great relationship, because he was always thinking outside the box, and he was always, taking on projects that were just, nobody had ever done it before, or, the company had definitely not done it before. So, trying to finish that stuff. And I was always like, let me help, because I really want, if it was something new, I wanted to learn about it. So, and I knew the service side was going to take it on. And Chris was awesome about kind of bringing everybody in and, looping everyone together, so that we were all on the same page, because we knew that, the service side eventually was going to have to take this over. Right. And if it was a new product that nobody's ever done, where are we going to get some training on it? Who do we call? Things along those lines. And obviously Chris and I had some back and forth a lot. And, but the great part about him is even though we may, have disagreeing opinions on, if we should put something in or if we shouldn't, at the end of the day, we kind of reel it back in and we'll kind of get back on the same page because we were always on the same team. But
Right.
Obviously different departments and construction and service always kind of go back and forth. So I had that conversation with him in 17. He had Liberty for about 3 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
And it was late in 17. We had a conversation, and we had sit on a couple of boards together for, like I said, I sit on board certification for NAESA, and I can't remember
Right.
what board it was, but we were at a conference together, and we kind of had a little brief conversation, and then we helped each other out on a project, and that kind of got the ball rolling. And then Chris is very driven, and he started to acquire a bunch of inspection companies and consulting companies. So he needed some management to help out. And we had a conversation, and I was like, look, I really want to do this, but there's consulting to me was kind of a older thing. And so was inspections. There was a lot
Sure.
of, retirement phase. I said, Chris and I are actually 2 days apart. So we were about the same age. So I was like, I want this to be, kind of a different type of, role. And that's when he gave me his vision of it, of what he wants to do with not just Liberty, but with these two types of services, consulting and inspections, it really kind of inspired me to jump on board and figure out where we want to go. And, everything we do kind of maybe upsets the flow of the norm in each of the industries, but it's always for the better. We talked previously about the consulting side, and it was like, are guys just, how are they making these specifications? Because some of them don't
Right.
even make sense and things along those lines. Well, we were able to kind of make it our own, standardize it so our team can just, go in there and enter the information that they need, and things start to generate themselves. And, using the technology that we have to make things more accurate, at the same time save time. So
Sure.
people that it's hard to find people that are very good at Excel and Word and things along those, that have a lot of elevator experience, because most of those guys are in the field, so you don't
Sure.
have that experience. And we were able to kind of take that and move it into something that is a little bit easier for someone that doesn't necessarily have the Microsoft platform down to a science, but they have elevators down to a science. So
Sure.
that's really what we need. And that's what we were able to do on the consulting side and the inspection side, really just getting in there and figuring out the ways to make it easier for the inspectors to, get their reports in, find codes, and then, workflows, processes, using admin teams instead of having the inspector do all that stuff, because that's where they're more reliable at.
Right. Let's chat for a second. What you mentioned, just kind of coming at it at a different angle, and obviously we're talking a little bit about automation. Is that one of the things that you did differently, or what? I guess the question is, what are the things that Liberty does differently from some of the others in the industry?
Sure. So, and this is what I believe. So when we're talking about modernization specifications and the design side of modernizations, we were able to basically take a document and have it so you only have to put in most of the information once. So if you're talking about building ABC, we put this information in once and it generates it throughout the whole document. So when you see a lot of specification documents, I know this sounds odd, but you see a lot of specification documents and they'll say, the top of it will say building ABC. And then as you get down somewhere in the middle of it, it'll say at building QRF. And
Wow.
it's the wrong dot, because nobody went through the whole document because they were copy and
Sure.
paste and things. So,
Right.
and that's where the difference is, and having the resources there at basically on your screen to show you if you're talking about what type of door operator to put in there. There's obviously linear and mechanical, and there's different, the waterproof ones. And we have that language set up. So it's already in the document,
Okay.
and you just need to bring it to the front. So you choose which one you want to use for each specific thing, but you have to choose it. So you don't see like 3 different options, which on specifications you see, because
It's not just left over from some other document.
Yep, exactly. And that's like it was always my biggest pet peeve was, well, it says, on page 3, it says this, but on page, 15, it contradicts itself. So, which one is it?
What are we talking about?
Narrowing that down and having that set up. And luckily, Liberty has had a ton of acquisitions. So we've kept almost all the personnel from all those people, unless they retired. Usually it was somebody was retiring. But right. People like Bill Snyder, he's a well-known consultant. Liberty acquired his company in 2019, and he spent the time to put all those actual information in there and actual code. Just for Florida alone, they use different keys for fire service in different areas. And I mean, I think there's 9 different regions that they use different keys for. So you have to have the right key for the right county that you're in and things along those lines. So instead of it just saying, use the right key for this county, it says the specific things. And that's where it holds people accountable, because when the specification is too generic, it kind of brings people like to change orders. And our goal is to never have a change order on a
that's a big goal, because I hear about change orders all the time.
It is. And that's like our biggest pitch is we'll make sure you don't have any change orders. If you agree to use our specification and allow our terms to all be in there, most likely you will not have a change order. And like I said, using somebody like Bill to be in there and, just say for Florida, because it's a, regional in there, like he has all the different nuances in there, and he has all the different, Florida has their elevator statute. So using that and having somebody like that knows all the information for each of those states is really good, because it's already in there. It's already available to you. So you don't have to, copy and paste it from somewhere else. You just bring it to the front or leave it in there. But it allows for the document to be very accurate and very specific.
Consistent throughout.
What generic.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And the generic part of it is what everybody else does. And Liberty's trying to be very specific about it. I don't like being generic.
Right.
But being specific about it and being as accurate as we can in each of those states. And even, when it comes to time, how long is this project going to take? Adding liquidated damages in there, so that if it takes over, we say it's going to take 180 days, then you better be in there 180 days, and your team can't pull off, things along those lines. Now, granted, we go on the same side, we want to help the elevator companies out. So, we allow for some type of notification process if there's things that are going to slow it down, especially right now with all the supply chain issues. But, it's really making sure that the client's going to pay the customer, and that at the same time, the client's going to pay the elevator company. And at the same time, the elevator company is going to do what they say they're going to do. And, it becomes a problem too with payments. I'm sure elevator companies, I wouldn't want to see their DSO, but elevator companies probably have all sorts of outstanding invoices from, punch lists and stuff like that. And we push the client to pay because we want to be able to use these great elevator companies, because some elevator companies won't work with clients, and they're usually clients we won't work with either. But sometimes we're in a position where the client hasn't paid the elevator company, and we're the advocate for the elevator company, even though technically the client is our client. So we're trying to help both sides of it.
Yeah. Talk a little bit more about, and you and I have, in our other conversations have talked about the kind of the balancing act that you walk between the client, I guess the elevator company. When you're a consultant, it seems to me from looking outside to be a very fine line that you're walking, and you're talking a little bit about kind of holding both sides accountable. What does that look like from your perspective?
Yeah, it's my everyday, right? And then my consulting side can definitely vouch for that. Is, we want to use all the best elevator companies, but sometimes a client's already in a long-term contract with somebody, and we need to build that relationship with them. And we're not there to just come in and start bullying, because in reality, most elevator companies' contracts are pretty solid, and they're very generic, so they don't really necessarily have to do all the things that the client wants, or if, Liberty comes in and says, we would like you to do these 10 things, most of the times they don't actually have to do it. However, if you come in there with the, approach of, look, we're trying to build this relationship and the client's unhappy, but most of the time these clients, if they have one elevator, they have 50. So
Sure.
If we're coming in there, we want to build this relationship up, because the elevator company and the client, they probably all just want to pay one invoice, right? We just want to throw everything on one invoice. They only have to pay one elevator contractor, makes things easier. You always have one point of contact. So how can we get you back on the same page, both the elevator company and the client? How can we get everybody back on the same page too? A lot of times it's a miscommunication there. The client is emailing the salesperson because that's who they had their initial conversation with. So and the salesperson, he's just forwarding it, and he's probably not even forwarding it to the right person, because some of these people are multi-states and it's just not going. So setting up a line of communication between the three of us and looping our team in, so that we can see that things are getting done and holding both sides accountable. So we've seen a ton of times where the elevator company is like, we don't have any service calls. And they're like, well, I called the mechanic. And you're like, well, yes, you called the mechanic. However, the mechanic is not the person that, takes the service call. So
Sure.
he's probably waiting for you to call them, the elevator company, so that we can basically have a service call on record, but it doesn't happen. And we see that a lot. And that's really, trying to mesh everybody together, and that's with the companies that we don't, or that isn't on the whole Liberty elevator program. That's, the best approach that we take is kind of opening up the lines of communication and seeing where we can kind of take it. And 80% of the time it works, and we kind of get a good response from both sides, and everybody buys into it. And that's really what we want, is everybody to buy into what's going on and what's going to happen. Because even if you're locked into a long-term contract with a client, you don't want to have a bad relationship with you, because you're never going to get any other work. And most of these building owners recommend, that's how we get a lot of stuff, is we don't do a lot of advertising. So, all of our stuff is word of mouth, and so are elevator companies. It's not like they, have a ad on TV, because you would never get to the right people.
Sure.
So, word of mouth, and saying, a lot of times what we hear is somebody has an elevator company already. They call us and we get in a mix, and they're like, well, my friend at such and such, building ownership, they use this company. Can we start using this company? And, we obviously will work with them in whatever way, but you hear it a lot because somebody's always recommending somebody else. And, we were doing a project in the Carolinas, and somebody recommended a company that we've never worked with before. So, but they have so many buildings with them that clearly they must be doing something right. So, we started talking to them, and we met with them personally to figure out, what kind of service they provide, and kind of got some projects behind them. And here, some of our clients on our third-party inspection side use them. So, they have a good reputation. So, we can all kind of work together. And that's really the thing about it, is just trying to work, trying to find that balance, like you said, and really get everybody to buy in. But if we, on our side of it, when we have a blank slate and we get to use the Liberty program, which has a pretty in-depth maintenance specification,
right?
I feel that a lot of elevator companies like to use it because it is not for the low bidder. It's for somebody that wants to have a lot of hours in. And luckily for them, is our contract says how many hours you need to be on site. And that's what we want you to, bid it at. And we want you to, we don't want you to bid it to try and be lower than the next person. Most likely, if we're asking you to bid something, it's because we feel that, you're very capable of doing this, and you put out a really good product. So for us, if it's just a 2-stop hydro, it's got an hour of maintenance, but that's for one elevator. So if there's two, it's, two hours. And we want you to bid it like that because you're held accountable. And if you don't go there for those 1 hours, then you lose money that month, and it gets kicked back to the client, and they get credited, a certain percent. But at the same time, it's, that's the hour that we wanted you to bid it. So sometimes we see the elevators are, maybe $50 to $100 higher than what they previously were per month. And, we have that conversation with our clients is this is why. And sometimes it's less money because, they know that it's going to be a bulk buy. And if you're, do a really good job with this at this location, you're going to get more. But even when it's a little bit higher, the client almost appreciates it because they know that they're going to have somebody there every month. You're not going to hear, I never see the elevator company, because that's a not new trend, but a trend that's been happening for a while in the elevator industry is, 250 plus units on an elevator mechanic. That doesn't fly with, a lot of these people that they get a bad reputation. They get bad Google reviews from, their hotel or apartment building. People don't want to move in or rent rooms because the elevator is making noise or the elevator is, shut down all the time. And to me, maintenance solves almost every issue. If you're actually doing the maintenance on the checklist, you're going to find 99% of the problems that's going on. Now, things happen, crazy little board issues happen and things along those lines, but you can start to see, if the elevator is starting to lean a little bit, or if they're, starting to clip some door locks. You see that at maintenance. If you're not there, you're not going to see it.
Right.
And as you're rushed around for a service call, you're not going to see it either. So, that's being there on site with a no rush kind of, just kind of have that ability to sit there and can say, ride the elevator, get on top, see what's going on, and know that you have a whole hour to do this, on an elevator. And you might only have 20 minutes worth of stuff to do, but then you can start to look around and, figure some stuff out. We go back to the gentleman I worked with that does the best maintenance ever. I kid you not, he had the least amount of service calls and had the most amount of elevators on his route. And he had the least amount of service calls on his route because he always did maintenance. He never had something in his door track. He always took care of the money bump by the door lock. And, he was always taking care of that door track and kind of making sure he would always hit it with a piece of sandpaper. And it was something that we would see all the time in the city because maintenance just never got done in the city and in Philadelphia. And it was just they took his work ethic, or I took his work ethic, and pushed it on to the next mechanic that kind of took over the route in Philadelphia. And all of a sudden the calls started dropping because they got to spend that amount of time in there. And that's really what it is obviously elevator owners want hours, right? That's the only way they can bill. So if you say to them, assume that you have to do this 1 hour, you get to bill for it, put it in your monthly maintenance number, and then put on top for material and things along those lines. But put those hours in there. So, because I want you to bill for it each month. I mean, it's recurring revenue. That's every business owner's dream is to, I'm not asking you to chase somebody to the bottom on this number. I want you to, really be accurate and really be, put the hours in for what's
do a good job and get paid for doing a good job. Right.
Exactly. Yep. So with this program, we've seen about a 30% reduction in service calls in that. I think it's 33.9 or something as of a couple weeks ago. But for the small pieces that we're able to look at, we obviously different clients, but we take a snapshot of each of them, and that's what it is. And, they're just numbers. So it's nothing that, we can't adjust them or we're not taking a wag at it. It's an actual number. And the great part about it is it's from different types of buildings. So it's hotels, it's condos, apartments, and commercial style buildings that, we're seeing this reduction in. So maintenance is really the thing. And I, years ago, when I started at one of the elevator companies, the owner told me, like, if you can basically get in there and actually do maintenance, you'll save money long term. So having 250 routes, and this was kind of during that beginning of that whole thing where some people were, pushing those 150 to 250 unit routes. I mean, you will save money because running service call guys cost a lot more money than maintenance guys,
right? Especially
on the, on the open shop style companies. Those guys cost a lot more money. So if you could just run those maintenance guys around and actually get a program in place where you're, holding your guys accountable for doing their work, you're going to see a great reduction in in service calls and nighttime callbacks. And that's when people really start to get aggravated.
Sure. Well,
the nighttime callbacks,
your labor gets really expensive too, right?
Yep, exactly. Yeah. And, some contracts, it's included, or you're only getting the difference in the pay. So, if it's the company's hourly rate is $200, then, it's $300 for a service call for, time and a half, but they're only getting $100 because they only get the difference in the pay. So if you don't have shutdown, it's more beneficial. Now obviously some contracts it's not included and the elevator company just gets the bill, but you're starting to see the trend where it's, you're usually just covering the difference. So you're just covering that 50% of the time and a half.
Right. No, this is good. And we're kind of running out of time. So I just want to maybe end with a question for you. And that is, what advice, what words of wisdom would you give to somebody who's, maybe they're following a similar path to you and are wondering, hey, should I get into consulting? And like you said, a lot of people think, oh, that's only something you do after you retire. Obviously that's not the case with you, but what would you offer to somebody who's coming up through that path?
Sure. Definitely education. Get your certifications. A lot of the certifications have an S, a supervisor, to add on to it. So you get it. So if you get your QEI, big component of getting QEI, you get a QEI, then you get the QEI supervisor after that. Because it's more education hours each year, so you get to learn more things. Dealing with the code is one thing, and then dealing with personnel is another thing. So, if you have that ability to train in each of those aspects, I think it'll make you a great elevator person and a great person in general to work with. So the education portion of it is, and having an open mind. I talk about a lot with my team, and some of the guys that I've worked with for years joke around about sometimes when they were on the service side, we would tell them to go do something that just sounded really odd when they were troubleshooting. And they're like, there's no way, it's not related, it's not even in the area of what we're, sure, looking at. Like, what are you talking about? And then they go and do it and they see that there's an instant change to the elevator and whatever problem was going. And it's not from me. It wasn't from me. I learned that from somebody. I learned those weird, odd troubleshooting skills. And so it doesn't matter whether you're looking at the code or you're looking at troubleshooting or, you're looking at design, keep an open mind about everything and really allow for change. Obviously control the change and help, be involved. Instead of complaining about something, just be involved in whatever's going on. Okay, if you don't think it's a good idea, explain yourself instead of just saying it's not a good idea. Get involved in the conversation and figure out what everybody's opinion is, and then try and work it out so that it's going to work for everybody, so that everybody is involved. And, if you're not involved in what's going on, then you can't help change it. So, and if you want to change it to a certain way, get involved, get involved in any type of committees out there. There's elevator committees, there's code committees. The code committees they're always looking for help. I'm part of the the EESF, which is the Elevator and Escalator Safety Foundation. Get involved in that. I mean, I know that's just for dealing with riding public, the safety of riding public, but get involved in that, because those people you get to have conversations with people from all over the country. And that's what getting involved really does, is it opens you up to speaking with people that you probably would never speak with if you just wanted to stay, if you're just your route mechanic and, you're not really getting involved in anything else. And all those things, I'm sure most employers would love to say we have an employee that's part of this board. So get involved and with the education side, with certification side, and all of the, elevator little things that are going on. Like NAESA has tons of committees. People have all sorts of groups. There's always golf outings that are involved in those things, but there's a fun aspect to it, and it kind of makes life a little more enjoyable when you get to be involved in the change and you get to see it. It makes the job more fun, and it makes it, you have that passion. And that's what it, kind of how, I realized that this was it for me. I want to be in elevators for a long time and being involved in all these little boards. One of the first boards I got involved in was in NAESA was their safety committee, and it was fun. We got to share videos, we got to give presentations, we were doing roundtables, and it was the things I got to hear from these guys. I was in Philadelphia, but I was at a roundtable with somebody from California. It was we got to hear the differences, but at the same time, a couple of weeks later, we were having a problem with some elevator that is manufactured in California, and I never worked on before, and there wasn't any other ones on the East Coast. And so I called that gentleman, and he walked me through how to, reset a fault code or something along those lines. So,
Right.
Being involved expands everything. One, you get to, meet new people, but two, you really get to get way more information about elevators, and definitely takes you to another level. And you'll see a lot of the people that are involved in all these things have a really good name. They have a really good reputation. And the best part about it is they're having fun in the industry. And that's really what it's all about. Everybody wants to go to work and have fun. And I want to go to work and have fun. So, meeting all these new people. We were just at the elevator, the consultants convention in Minnesota a couple weeks ago. And I got to meet a ton of people that I'd never met before. And, I thought I met everybody that's involved in all these things. And I'd never been to that convention before. So I got to meet a ton of new people, got to see people that I, don't get to see. But I mean, there's so many friendships that I got to develop from people that are all across the country, in Texas and Alabama and, everywhere. It's incredible that we get to do that. And so if you want to be on the consulting side, I say get involved in things, because consultants are the ones that drive, how elevators are going to be installed and what the specification is going to look like. So if you're involved on every aspect, and whether it's code or construction, or even safety, I love safety, like actual worker safety. So for me, I was involved in a lot of the safety things for construction industry, not necessarily elevators. You'd be very surprised how many spots they leave open for elevator contractors, because none of the elevator contractors are involved in a lot of these big construction safety forums, or even big, large conventions for construction. There's not a lot of elevator people. So there's not always somebody looking to be in those spots. So there's tons of opportunity to, get involved, and, you really expand your career when you're involved in things that nobody else was involved in before.
That's great. That's great. Good advice. And Joe, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure, and
Absolutely.
Wish you the very best.
All right. Thanks for having me. And I look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to the Elevator Careers Podcast, sponsored by the Allred Group, a leader in elevator industry recruiting. You can check us out online at elevatorcareers.net. Please subscribe, and until next time, stay safe.